Yesterday, we have started to cover more deeper into the whole cycle of desire. So, firstly, we need to see that desire is bound up with dukkha, and then the whole phenomenon of desire, with its cycle from wanting and gratification, hangs on our ways of seeing things. If we can look at desire from a different angle, its force will be abated, it will be lessened, and then it will result in moving towards renunciation. So what is needed is firstly wise consideration compared to what we usually do, unwise consideration. Unwise consideration means that we only look at the surface of things, scan them in a very short range, short-term way in our immediate interests and wants. Rarely do we dig into the roots of our involvement or explore the long-range consequences. Now, to counter this, we need to call for wise consideration, looking into hidden undertones to our actions, exploring the results, evaluating the worthiness of the goals, our goals. We have to be willing and prepared to discover what is true, not just what is comforting. Because the last line here is there, feels a little bit poetic as well. For real security always lies on the side of truth, not on the side of comfort zones. This is when most people say, oh, I'm in my comfort zone, and that's why we are not growing. Yeah. Okay. So secondly, we explore again the whole cycle of desire. So here, considering the whole cycle of desire, starting from the moment it springs up, it creates in us a sense of lack, the pain of want. We already, when the thought springs up, the thought of desire, we are already not getting what we want until the time we get what we want. So to end this struggle, we want to fulfill the desire. And then this can go two ways. Firstly, if our effort fails, we don't get what we want, we will experience all of this frustration, disappointment, and sometimes despair. And then if we go the second way, even after we get what we want, it is not totally unqualified. We worry that we might lose ground that we have gained. We feel driven to secure our position, safeguard our territory. We want more, we want higher, we want control over it. The demands are endless and eternal. We want all our things to last forever, but all our objects of desire are impermanent. Whether it's wealth, power, other persons, inevitably we will separate from them, and the pain that accompanies the separation is proportion to our attachment to it. The last line here summarized well. Strong attachment brings much suffering. Little attachment brings little suffering. No attachment brings no suffering. So at this point, Tammy yesterday brings up, it's kind of okay to have desire as long as we have the awareness that this could cause us some kind of a pain. Yeah, so that is perhaps one way to, one angle to look at this. And also, Xing Hui yesterday brings up about, hey, then what about Buddhism? What about we desire some kind of attainment in meditation? And is that a bad thing? Yeah, actually, Shifu also mentioned this last time. Students keep bringing, sometimes brings up. And then Shifu, what about the Dharma? Shouldn't we not too attached to the Dharma? Yeah. So Shifu answer was, the Dharma is the last thing that we should let go of. Yeah. And at the very high level, indeed, some venerables, they they can be too attached to the teachings and they have to let go of it. But I think at our level, this is not our problem yet. Yeah, that's firstly. Secondly, yesterday I need to correct myself. It was a conversation with Venerable Ananda and a Brahman. So I'll bring up the sutta right now very quickly. So this sutta is called the Brahmana Sutta from Samyutta Nikaya 51:15. So it was I will go through this sutta quickly. It was a conversation with this Brahman Unnaba, and he asked Venerable Ananda questions. Firstly, Master Ananda, what is the aim of this holy life? Live under Gautama the contemplative. And then Venerable Ananda replied, Brahman, the holy life is lived under the Blessed One with the aim of abandoning desire. Then he asked further. So these are dialogues between these two. Is there a path? Is there a practice for the abandoning of that desire? Yes, there is a path. There is a practice for the abandoning of that desire. What is the path, the practice for the abandoning of that desire? So Venerable Ananda basically explained the whole path to him. Then the Brahman asked further, if that is so, Master Ananda, then it's an endless path and not one with an end. For it's impossible that one could abandon desire by means of desire. Yeah, so this is somewhat related to what Xin Hui questioned yesterday, right? Yeah, and then Venerable Ananda asked him back, answer as you see fit. This is like quite classic. Usually the Buddha always use this phrase as well. The Buddha asks the questioners back, and then the questioners will answer. And then finally the questioner will see the point. In a modern term, sometimes people call this the Socrates method, in which we ask questions to the questioners so that they can see the point, they can arrive at the answer themselves. So this is one thing that I found pretty cool in Buddhism. So Venerable Ananda asked, what do you think? Didn't you first have desire thinking, I'll go to the park? And then when you reach the park, wasn't that particular desire allayed? Yes, sir. Okay. Didn't you have persistence thinking, I'll go to the park? And then when you reach the park, wasn't that particular persistence allayed? Yes, sir. Didn't you first have the intent thinking, I'll go to the park? And then when you reach the park, wasn't that particular intent allayed? Yes, sir. And the last one, didn't you first have an act of discrimination thinking, I'll go to the park? And then when you reach the park, wasn't that particular act of discrimination allayed? Yes, sir. Yeah, and then it explains the whole, these questions relate to the path. It goes back to the path when an arahant whose mental events are ended, who has reached fulfillment, done the task, laid down the burden, attained the true goal, totally destroyed the fetter of becoming, and who is released through right gnosis. Yeah, actually, I'm not sure what gnosis means. Gnosis is the common Greek noun for knowledge. Okay. Whatever desire he first had for the attainment of arahantship, on attaining arahantship, that particular desire is allayed. Whatever persistence he first had for the attainment of arahantship, on attaining arahantship, that particular persistence is allayed. Whatever intent he first had for the attainment of arahantship, on attaining arahantship, that particular intent is allayed. Whatever discrimination he first had for the attainment of arahantship, on attaining arahantship, that particular discrimination is allayed. So what do you think, Brahman? Is this an endless path or one with an end? Finally, the Brahman sees for himself based on all these, questionings, Socrates method. So, you're right, Master Ananda. This is a path with an end, not an endless one. Magnificent, Master Ananda, magnificent. Just as if he were to place upright what was overturned, to reveal what was hidden, to show the way to one who was lost, or to carry a lamp into the dark, so that those with eyes could see forms. In the same way has Master Ananda, through many lines of reasoning, made the Dharma clear. I go to Master Gautama for refuge, to the Dharma and to the Sangha of monks. May Master Ananda remember me as a lay follower who has gone for refuge from this day forward for life. Okay, that's the end of the sutta. Okay, so that's basically a recap of what we covered yesterday. Any questions or comments before we continue? Okay, if not, I think we can finish the last two paragraphs for the intention of renunciation. Contemplating the dukkha inherent in desire is one way to incline the mind to renunciation. Another way is to contemplate directly the benefits flowing from the renunciation. To move from desire to renunciation is not, as might be imagined, to move from happiness to grief, from abundance to destitution. It is to pass from gross, entangling pleasures to an exalted happiness and peace. From a condition of servitude to one of self-mastery. Desire ultimately breeds fear and sorrow, but renunciation gives fearlessness and joy. It promotes the accomplishment of all three stages of the threefold training. It purifies conduct, aids concentration, and nourishes the seed of wisdom. The entire course of practice from start to finish can, in fact, be seen as an evolving process of renunciation, culminating in Nibbana as the ultimate stage of relinquishment. The relinquishing of all foundation of existence. Sabupadi Patini Saga. Okay, so firstly, let's define some words. Entangling pleasures. So entangling means cause to become twisted together with or caught in. Some synonyms: intertwine, entwine, tangle, intertwist. The second word, exalted, happiness. So exalted is defined as first definition of a person or their rank or status at a high or powerful level. Second definition, in a state of extreme happiness. So what this sentence means is that when a person renounces, it is to pass from gross entangling pleasures to an exalted happiness, to a higher kind of happiness and peace. And then the next one, from a condition of servitude. So let's define this. The state of being a slave or completely subject to someone more powerful. Yeah. The second one is an archaic or law definition. The subjection of property to an easement. I think the first definition is more relevant to us. The state of being a slave. So from being a slave to one of self-mastery. I think the last word is probably relinquishment. To renounce or surrender. To let go, release. To relinquish one's hope. Okay, so at first read, actually, for me, this is not so easy to understand, especially this whole part. So when I told my colleague one time, when I was at Singtel around 2 years ago, sometimes I get frustrated with the work, and then I made a casual remark. Maybe I should just become a monk. So I told them this. Then he said to me, no, don't become a monk. You cannot enjoy all this good food anymore. You cannot enjoy all this, worldly pleasure. Why do you want to become a monk? So this is what he told me. So in a sense, you can see that all these things that he mentioned, the pleasures of good food or the enjoyment that he mentioned that I cannot enjoy anymore, I think, is what is meant by this entangling pleasures, gross entangling pleasures, which is the pleasures that we usually get from all this worldly stuff, food, movies, entertainment, Netflix, YouTube, But I think what most people don't understand is when someone become a monastic, it's not like they is described here. They grieve and they have destitution. So I haven't defined destitution here. So yeah, poverty is so extreme that one lacks the means to provide for oneself. Yeah. So most people thought of the monastic life this way. But I think some of us have this sense that it is not exactly true, because they are not necessarily depriving themselves, but they live a very simple life, so that it's enough for them to have to alleviate their hunger and just have a simple lodging and live a very simple life. And that kind of happiness, I think, is much more higher and exalted than the happiness that most of us experience from the worldly things or worldly life. Yeah. So I'm not sure if you guys agree on this. So any comments or questions? Okay, Jillian, yes.
Sharing such a nice sutra just now. I think when someone decides to go into a monastic path, first of all, I think if we stay with the monastic in some of the monasteries, actually their lifestyle is pretty not as simple as we think, because they need to do a lot of other work to support the monastery, not just go there and practice, meditate and meditate. Actually, they got to do like a lot of household things that we do at home. They have to cook, they have to sweep, they have to offer the service, clean up the toilets, they have to sweep the staircase, they have upkeep the lay followers coming into the activities of the monastery. They have to plan, they have to give classes, they have to still do quite a lot of things that actually how you need to maintain a household actually. And then, but more importantly, I think what differs their house, a monastic household and a lay follower household, is they are guided by the Tripajam, which is the teacher. They are guided by the monastic rules. for the nuns to observe 300 and I think it's 52 monastic rules. For the man, for the monk, 280 something. So they're guided by these restrictions to help them upkeep and practice, and to have like what they started, it purifies their conduct. First point, because you need to do that before you can really help in their concentration and meditation. So I think, but at the same time, it is very advisable for monastic to stay in the community for a period of time, because it is also the way to practice patience, generosity, and the six perfections. If a monastic is always not allowed to stay alone when they first been ordained, because they need to learn how to live with others with all different types of habits, and most of them come from different backgrounds, and some of them can be very extreme people, who comes from, and some of them can be used to be, how should I put, alcoholic, and then became monastic. Yeah, and some of them could be very extreme. And they come because they want to lead a different path in their life, right? And you need to live with people who have this background, and you need to understand that you need to be very compassionate about it as well. So it's all practice, part of the practice. So I think a lot of times people say, oh yeah, I just go to the monastery and I'll have peace, and I'll be away from the mundane situation.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's not very realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a very realistic way of looking at it is to understand that this is taking a refuge in a new household.
Mm-hmm.
That means they are guided by new rules, from a lay follower rules to a monastic rules. And that's something that I think is very important when we come to, like, especially now we're talking about renunciation. Renunciation is not the renunciation on the outside, right? It's a renunciation in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the renunciation in the mind means there's a lot of things that we've accumulated over this life, habits, the way we think and do things. So at the same time, but we're more guided when we go to monastic, because everybody do it that way. So you're more disciplined. You really can remind yourself our conduct, So I think in a very similar way, even in our own household, we can practice mind renunciation. But to do that, we need, like, what we do every morning is just at least chant the things that we do every day. We can, in a group, not in a group, because that starts the right intention to start with. The right intention in the morning is important, right? So then it will start to remind us, okay, we can live the day like this today. So it's very much in a monastery, like we chant the precepts, we do concentration, meditation, to remind us the step we want to take. So, but we're more guided. Yeah. So I think that when we compare household or non-household, in that sense, is because of the way of life. Yeah, it is, and then goes into the way of life, because it's only through the way of life, which is conduct. It purifies conduct first. That's quite important. Then you can do it helps our concentration and our mind practice. Yeah. So I think we can also apply some of that in our daily life, even we are not in a monastery, to that extent.
Okay, thanks, Jolene, for sharing. Yeah, I mean, one nun also told me that the monastic life is not all beds and roses. You did not just go to monastery and practice for maybe like 16 hours. I think, like Jolene mentioned, they have to take care of a lot of to maintain the monastery, to cook, to clean, to upkeep the monastery. Yeah. So, but I think what I'm trying to illustrate in this paragraph is that different kind of activities, they all give pleasures or happiness, but I think there are qualitative difference in the type of happiness. So what I mean by that is that when you compare activity A and B, it is possible to draw out the qualitative difference whether activity A gives us a higher kind of happiness and activity B gives us a lower kind of happiness. So maybe let's explore some examples. Let's say what do you call being let's say eating. You can eat in two ways. Firstly, you can eat like an animal when your food is here and then you just wallow in your food and then finish your food quickly. That's one. Secondly, but you can eat you can eat very mindfully, like a monk, you know. They are very mindful with their bowl, with their spoon, the way they scoop until they put it in their mouth. Yeah. So that's one way to compare activity. When you eat not unmindfully compared to mindfully, we would probably say that eating mindfully gives us a higher kind of happiness. But perhaps this example is not so illustrative. Then maybe we use the example of daydreaming. You know, some people like to daydream, you know, just wandering around, thinking about stuff mindlessly. Yeah. And then you compare it with some people who do meditation, you know, like all of us in the morning. So do you think meditation compared to daydream gives some kind of a higher exalted happiness? Hard to answer, but I would say so. Yeah. I would say meditation is the qualitatively higher happiness than daydreaming. And then even at the same type of activity, let's say watching a movie. Sometimes you know a movie is a very low quality slapstick comedy where they use cheap tricks to, you know, to hook you or make you laugh. Yeah. And then there is some movie that is a very philosophical, very beautiful, and you can learn a lot from it. There's a lot of moral lessons. And I feel like this kind of movie give me a much higher sense of happiness after watching it. So it is a heavier movie, but at the end, it gives me more fulfillment after finishing the movie. So even watching a movie, it can be differentiated into qualitative difference. And that is some examples that I have. So not sure if you guys agree. Any comments from some of you? Okay. Maybe one other example, you know, sometimes we read the sutta, yeah? Like what we do right now. We read a book. And this book is actually, I feel like a good kind of book. And because it touched our spiritual sense and engage our mind in a very, I think, healthy style of discussions compared to what I do as well in day-to-day, scrolling through Facebook and Instagram. You know, both are reading, right? But I feel like this kind of reading with all of you gives me a higher fulfillment, a deeper sense of meaning. And for me, it's a qualitatively higher activity compared to just mindlessly scroll Facebook, Instagram, Reddit. Yeah. So I think this is what is meant by exalted happiness and peace compared to gross entangling pleasures of, you know, scrolling Facebook, Instagram, all this mindless stuff. Yeah. Even though both are reading activity. Yeah, I'm not sure if you guys can see here. So, okay, Lin Tai.
Yes, I think what I like about this paragraph is actually the what he mentioned here from, where is it? From a condition of servitude to one of self-mastery. So I think this is quite important, you know, for our lay life, because most of the time we just chase after what we call pleasures, right? And when we chase after pleasures, actually we are in the position of servant of our pleasure. But when we take charge of what we are doing, like when we are doing something mindfully, so at that time we are the self-master. So we are the master of ourselves. We are the master of our pleasure. It's not that we are the servant of our pleasure anymore. And so there is one thing that I learned a lot, but I learned there's one thing that I like about the, you know, the Plum Village tradition that I'm very keen to learn more about. So whatever they are doing during the day, they do it with mindfulness, right? So they have that kind of attitude. So for example, when you are cleaning the toilet, for example, you are not thinking that, why do I have to do this? You know, this is such a dirty kind of job. Why do I have to do that? So if you have that kind of attitude, it means that you are still the servant of the kind of job that you are doing. But when you are doing it with the attitude that, okay, yes, I have such a good opportunity to contemplate, you know, whatever it is here, I can clean it. It's like I am cleansing my own mind. And I can see that, you know, so whatever that is left in the toilet, is it something that can contemplate on impermanence, right? The food that you eat, when you enjoy it, it is a food. But when you see it in another form, it is something else. It's not the food anymore. So, I mean, you know, that kind of attitude that swept from being a servant to being a master of ourselves. So I think that is something that is quite important. And if we are mindful in everything that we do every day, when we walk, when we do the washing up, when we do our brushing, you know, whatever that we do with mindfulness, it means a lot. And it changes a lot too. That is what I want to share.
Okay, thanks, Lin Toi. Yeah, very good. So yeah, I think this is a really good point as well. A condition of servitude to one of self-mastery. So I recall a lecture says, of course, we all seek pleasures and avoid pains. But if we only do that, then we are the slave of the pleasures and pain. Only when we transcend above pleasure and pain, then we can consider ourselves truly free. And on the surface, people sometimes define freedom as we can do whatever we want. So that is the first level of freedom. But when we only do whatever we want, we are still a slave of our desires, of our want. The true freedom is when we transcend above our wants and desires. Yeah. So very good point, Lin Tai. Okay. So I think let's finish up the section by the last paragraph. So any volunteer who would like to read the last paragraph? Okay, how about Xing Hui? Would you like to read?
Okay. When we methodically contemplate the dangers of desire and the benefits of renunciation, gradually we steal our mind away from the domination of desire. Attachments are shed like the leaves of a tree, naturally, and spontaneously. The changes do not come suddenly, but when there is persistent practice, there is no doubt that they will come. Through repeated contemplation, one thought knocks away another. The intention of renunciation dislodges the intention of desire.
Thanks, Xinghui. Okay, so with this paragraph, we have closed the section on the intention of renunciation. I think it's pretty straightforward as well. It's just a summary that when we more methodically contemplate the cycle of desire, the dangers of it, and the benefits of renunciation, then gradually we can steer our mind away from the domination of desire, from, in the previous paragraph, a condition of servitude to self-mastery. The changes do not come suddenly, of course, but as long as we practice persistently, there's no doubt that they will come. So one day it will happen. Okay, so that's all for today. Any comments or questions? Not just these two paragraphs, but maybe the whole section, or even for the past sessions. Calling once, calling twice. Okay, so if not, then let's do a dedication. Dedication of merits. 愿消三障诸烦恼，愿得智慧真明了，普愿罪障悉消除，实是常行菩萨道。阿弥陀佛。Till we meet again, may we be guided by the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Thanks everyone for participating. Have an exalted Sunday ahead. So that's all I have for today. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Stay
Marcel.
safe.
Stay safe. Stay safe, everyone. Yes.
Thanks, Marcel. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Marcel,
Thanks,
so
Jolene.
we go to the same Zoom, right?
Same Zoom link, yes. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
see you then.
加油 very
Hey,
good.
thanks,
Keep
Jolene.
it up.
Thank you, Jolene.
阿弥陀佛。
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I enjoy actually.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Marcel.
Hey, thanks. Bye, Tammy.
Bye.